All right, so make sure everyone set that up, and then I'll have everybody, let's mute ourselves except for our presenters, and I will pull up your presentation on eutrophication. All right, we are ready to go when you are.
Okie dokie. All right, this is Ocean Eutrophication by Min and I, Keone and Min. All right. What causes eutrophication? Fertilizers, sewage into bodies of water, aquaculture, and natural events. Going into depth about that, firstly, fertilizers. A large portion of eutrophication is caused by fertilizers, and more specifically, the nitrate and phosphates in fertilizers. Agricultural practices such as fertilizers on lawns or golf courses or other fields contribute to phosphate and nitrate nutrient accumulation. And when these nutrients are washed off the surface by runoff into lakes or rivers or oceans and other bodies of water when arranged, the plankton, algae, and other aquatic plant life are fed, overfed, I guess, and their photosynthesis activity is increased. This causes dense growth of algal blooms and plant life such as water hyacinthus and other aquatic environments. All right, sewage into bodies of water. In some parts of the world, like developing nations, sewage water is directly discharged into water bodies such as rivers, lakes, and oceans. As a result, it introduces high amounts of chemical nutrients, which stimulates the growth of algal blooms and other aquatic plant lives, which threatens survival of aquatic life in many ways. Some countries may also treat the sewage water, but still discharge it into water bodies after the treatment, so it doesn't help as much. Aquaculture. Aquaculture, has gone over before, is technique of like growing shellfish or other fish or aquatic plants in water containing dissolved nutrients. It's a largely embraced practice in the recent times, but it is one of the top-breaking contributors to eutrophication. If it's not properly managed, the unconsumed food particles together with, say, fish excretion can significantly increase the levels of nitrogen and phosphorus in the water, which again causes dense growth of the plants. And lastly, natural events. So natural events such as floods or the natural flow of rivers and streams can also wash off excess nutrients into land, going into the water systems. And that also causes excess growth of algal blooms. Next slide. Human contribution. Once again, it does say fertilizer because that is a large portion of the contribution to eutrophication. So a lot of like big farms will spray down their whole fields with fertilizer, and when that gets run off into lakes, it causes large algal blooms. Animal feeding operations, or concentrated animal feeding operations, are also a large contributor of phosphorus and nitrogen, responsible for eutrophication. The animal feeding operations normally discharge these large portions of nutrients, and they find their ways into rivers, streams, such as other bodies of water, where they accumulate in large concentrations and cause algal blooms. What you're seeing right now is also the Yellow Sea, which was that was a big thing in 2013. It was a massive algal bloom right next to China, and you can see this man is enjoying it. Let's see, once all these plant lives begin to decompose they take all the oxygen up in the water, thus having no more oxygen for the animals and other creatures living in the water, so it kills them, creating dead zones, which are just massive bodies of water that are usually non-toxic but can be, but massive bodies of water where nothing can live. Next slide. Effects of eutrophication. Firstly, it threatens aquatic life. So pretty much, as I said earlier, but I guess I'll go into depth about that. When the ecosystems experience like large intake of nutrients, the phytoplankton and other photosynthetic plants grow like immensely, and they're commonly known as algal blooms. As an outcome, these blooms limit the amount of oxygen required for the fish to breathe and other animals or plant species in the water. And this oxygen depletion happens when the algae or plant life die and they are decomposing. Yes, when the oxygen reaches hypoxic levels, the animal and plant species under the water, such as fish or shrimp, suffocate to death. And in very extreme cases, the anaerobic conditions encourage the growth of bacteria that produces toxins, which are deadly to marine mammals and birds. The growth of phytoplankton also causes reduced light penetration into lower depths of water, which brings about dead zones where plants under these massive decomposing algal blooms can't get any lights, which would stop them from growing. And then, yeah, dead zones and deteriorating the water quality. Algal blooms are pretty toxic, and once the water reaches the anaerobic conditions, the growth of more toxic bacteria is increased. The consequence of this is extensive deterioration of water quality, and it in turn caused a decline in the availability of clean drinking water. Dense growths of algal bloom and photosynthetic bacteria in surface waters can also block water systems, which limits the availability of piped water. Going off this, toxic algal blooms have shut down numerous water supply systems across the globe. In 2007, for example, more than 2 million residents of Wuxi, China, could not access piped drinking water for more than a week due to the severe attack by algal blooms on Lake Taihu. Next slide. And this is a visualization of that.
Great. Do you want us to watch the whole video?
Yeah, it should be
Okay.
about a minute, maybe longer.
I forgot to say too that Min sent in a video of himself, so we can watch that as well.
Oh, okay, great.
Afterwards, so
cool.
For his portion of the presentation. Okay, pull this up. Videos should play pretty well through Zoom.
What is eutrophication? It's a problem that should matter to you, whether you live near the ocean or not. That's because it begins wherever people live and ends with damage to resources we all use and enjoy. It all starts when nutrients get into lakes and oceans. Remember, what's waste to humans can be food to plants and other creatures. Nutrients feed algae, like they do other plants. Algae grows and blocks sunlight. Plants die without sunlight. Eventually, the algae dies too. Bacteria digest the dead plants, using up remaining oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide. If they can't swim away, fish and other wildlife become unhealthy or die without oxygen. But it doesn't have to be this way. Protecting marine resources starts with sound agricultural and waste management practices.
Did that play all right for most of you on your screens? I'm going to need a verbal. I can't see a lot of you. So did it play all right?
Very good.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right. Maybe a little laggy.
It was pretty good.
Yeah? Cool. All right. This works much better than WebEx. All right.
Okay, next slide. Effects on humans. Firstly, poisonous water. The cyanobacteria, also referred to as dinoflagellates, which generates this red tide, as you can see on that right picture, release very powerful toxins, which create high poison levels in the water, even at very low concentrations. So that whole red tide you see there, that's full of those dinoflagellates. And at night, it becomes bioluminescent also at the bottom, that blue portion. But yeah, very toxic. Don't go in there. Endangers fishing. One of the main characteristics of eutrophication is the increased growth of floating plants, such as algae and photosynthetic bacteria, and the development of extensive and dense mats of floating plants, such as Nile cabbage or water hyacinthus. Uh, Whenever this happens on a body of water, fishing becomes endangered. It's simply a lot more difficult to set the fishing nets in the water, and the plants flowing on the water limit the mobility of boats and other fishing vessels. So, along with killing the fish, it also makes fishing much, much more difficult. And lots of recreational activities. Um, Another large problem of eutrophication is how these algal blooms and other aquatic plants that float on the water, extensive area of the water surface, um, can damage or stop recreational activities, such as boating or swimming. Eutrophication can take over entire lakes and, yeah, makes them completely unusable for drinking water or for recreational activities. Documentation. Let's see here. Sorry. Okay. Documentation. It started around since the early 20th century, and it began with studies of the Great Lakes and overgrowths. Uh, and as you can see here, where sorry, I'm okay. Uh, Sorry, I'm moving my, okay. Had to move my Zoom, put my notes in a weird location. All right, so as you can see here, oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic, and hypertrophic. These are the 4 different cases of, or definitions of eutrophication, where oligotrophic would mean low in nutrients, mesotrophic would mean intermediate nutrients, and eutrophic would be high nutrients, where hypertrophic, uh, as you can tell by the name, would be very high in nutrients. And at the time, these definitions were derived from the estimates between water bodies with different nutrient status, and they're judged according to their phytoplankton communities. So that's how eutrophication got its name. Okay, I guess we can pass it on to Min.
Great. Okay. Very detailed. So I'll pull up Min sent video, and again, hopefully it should play well through Zoom here.
Hey everyone. Hey Mr. Haight. This man, and I'm going to talk about the animal phylum that has been affected by eutrophication. Animals that live near the surface of the ocean.
Is everyone able to hear him well? I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Cool.
Are the ones who suffer the most from eutrophication, since they live near the algal bloom, where most decomposers take place. Some of the most common animals that are affected by eutrophication are shrimps, fish, clams, or even birds who tend to catch their prey over the ocean surface. Humans and many other animals live on land can also suffer diseases caused by eutrophication. These two images are just some examples of animals that are affected by eutrophication. Common physical features. The animals who are affected by eutrophication come in all different color and all different sizes, from small to large, such as shrimps, squids, crabs, turtles, fish. Fish is the animal who is most affected by eutrophication, since it requires the most oxygen for respiration and also most oxygen to decompose its dead body. This is a broad picture of how eutrophication affects the marine life. As fertilizers are added into the ocean water, it triggers the growth of algal bloom, which is a type of plant that covers the surface of the ocean. As these plants grow larger and faster, they block the sun, which causes plants that live in the bottom of the ocean die due to the lack of energy for photosynthesis. As the plants die, decomposers and bacteria decay these dead plants, which take away a huge level of oxygen in the water. Animals such as fish therefore die because they cannot complete the process of respiration since they don't have enough oxygen. This can further lead to bigger problems such as water contamination and the spreading of diseases. So why is this dangerous? As decomposers decay the dead animals in the ocean, it not only takes away a huge amount of oxygen in the ocean, but it also pollutes the water and makes it extremely toxic to live. Animals such as crustaceans can carry these diseases caused by decomposers in the ocean to land and spread the diseases to the consumer, mainly human. Birds can also carry these diseases to land since some of them consider fish as the primary source of food. So what are the effects of eutrophication on humans? Like birds, humans also consider fish as one of our primary source of food. Fishermen and cargo ships consume and sell fish who carry diseases caused by eutrophication all across the ocean. This is a main cause of food poisoning, which can be fatal. What are the actions that have been taken to save the marine life? The very first one is fishing at recreational sites where there's clear water and low nutrients and high clarity. Minimize the use of fertilizer on land near oceans and lakes. Last but not least, give out paper propaganda in order to show eutrophication has negatively affected the marine life. Some of the organizations and special agencies that have contributed in order to solve eutrophication. The first one is NEAT, or NEAT, is a short term for a highly advanced strategy. Involves the use of satellite in order to spot eutrophication as soon as possible. Although this method is a little bit pricey, but it's very beneficial. The second one is the nitrates directive. Prevent nitrates and other fertilizers being released to the ocean by promoting new agricultural practices. Why should these act over others? The most important one is eutrophication has seriously effect on both the marine life and the human life. It reduces the clarity of water in the ocean, which makes it unnatural. It's the main reason that leads to water pollution and water contamination. The last one is study about eutrophication can also lead to further marine biology study, which can be very beneficial for scientific research. That's the end. Thank you for listening.
All right. Boy, it sounds like he was like sitting in some traffic while he was recording that. Great. All right, I'll have everybody unmute yourselves, please. Round of applause for Min and Keone.
Oh, oops.
I'm sure we can get this, though. Very thorough. All right, questions for Keone.
Okay, looking pretty good.
Keone, have you ever heard of the Green Revolution?
Yeah,
Or has anyone ever heard of it?
yeah, that was something I looked into during my research. I think you pointed me towards that actually.
Yep. Yeah. So that's just when human use of fertilizer really exploded. We kind of
Hmm.
came up with these plants that grew well as long as they were given fertilizer, and then they have really high yields. And so that's what really made this occur more and more. Like you had a slide on this saying that it had started kind of back in like the early 20th century, like right over here, first documented. And that is it's sort of a result of the fact that yeah, we started using so much more fertilizer, it started washing off everywhere. I also like that you mentioned at one point that fish excretion is contributing. Does anyone know what Keone meant by fish excretions? What's he using fancy words to describe?
Poop.
Fish poop. Yep. Just like how cows produce manure. We don't think about fish creating a lot of poop, but they do, especially when they're being raised in aquaculture. And that can cause a variety of other problems too. So, Keone, you also mentioned water hyacinths at one point. They're a big problem in Africa. They're a type of plant that grows on the surface of the water, and yeah, if they have enough nutrients, they explode. And really, really messed up sort of like subsistence fishermen in particular, where these were literally couldn't get their boats out on the water because they'd have to go through all these plants,
Hmm.
and all the fish were dying as well. So, anyway, great. I like Min's point too about the satellites tracking, because that looks like the kind of photo you have right here is like a
Yeah.
satellite photo showing where eutrophication is occurring. So it's kind of cool that they can actually like globally assess that. So amazing. All right. Any other questions or anything from Min or Keone? Alrighty, who would like to go next? We need to hear from either Ethan, Tammy, or Angela and Landon. Who
Sure.
wants to step up?
I can go.
That's Ethan?
Yeah.
All right, Tammy, you feeling ready?
Yeah, sort of.
All right. Again, so everyone should copy the notes. Looks like you guys are going to talk about oil spills, so make sure you've got your reference template ready to go. Again, I'm going to try to hold you guys to between 10 and 15 minutes. Keone definitely was thorough in his presentation. We want to make sure we get this done in time today. All right, we are ready when you are. Go for it.
All right, cool. Okay. Our topic was oil spills, and it's the cause and human contribution. So oil spills are usually caused by like when like people are being careless or like natural disasters. So like when people are careless, like tankers, barges, pipelines, refineries, drilling rigs, and like stuff like that, they leak, and then that spills into the oil spills into the ocean. And it's also caused by natural disasters because like they break down equipments and the oil leaks. Next. The effects on humans. There's like direct and indirect exposures to oil spills on humans. Direct exposures are like breathing contaminated air in contact with skin, because after the oil spills, like the contaminated air gets into like the like the environment, and then like people can get like lung cancer or lung disease or something like that from breathing contaminated air in contact with skin. Could get you like skin cancer or skin diseases. And indirect exposures are bathing in contaminated water and drinking contaminated water, because after the oil spills, um like even after like you clean the oil spill, like some oil still remains in the ocean, and then again it can cause like skin diseases and lung disease. The first incident that was recorded. What happened in 1859. It was near Titusville in Pennsylvania, and the specifics are about the event wasn't recorded, but it's possible that the first oil spills occurred while like oil was transported from this well, and but they don't know like the specifics. Some other big incidents, some notable ones are the Exxon Valdez oil spill that happened in Alaska, and the Deep Horizon oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico. The Exxon Valdez oil spill was in Prince William Sound in Alaska and happened on March 24th in 1989. It was caused by grounding of the Exxon oil tanker, and like 250,000 seabirds and 2,800 otters, 300 harbor seals, 247 bald eagles, and 22 orcas were killed because of the oil spill, and it impacted over 1,300 miles of the ocean. And the Deep Horizon oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico, it was on April 20th, 2010, and it was probably like the biggest one recently. And then it was caused by flawed well pan, and they didn't include enough cement in between like production casing and the protection casing, and it affected about 2,500 to 68,000 square meters, and then it caused also caused 13 deaths and 17 injuries, and the volume was 4.9 million barrels of oil. Next page. The most effective places in the world. Number one is Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico, it leads the world with 267 spills, and then the second most is the northeastern U.S. with 140 spills, and other places are like Japan and Europe. Alaska is also has a lot. So here's some ways to prevent oil spills. So you can people should like when you're on a boat and you have like oil like barrels, you should tighten the bolts, because like when bolts are loose, the um oil usually spills when like the bolts are loose. So like by tightening it, it prevents like a lot of it prevents them from spilling. And after it's spilled, they should use dispersants to prevent marine animals and people to get affected, because the dispersants, they break up like oils into like oils break up oil slick into like small droplets, and it dilutes throughout the the ocean water. And there's another way to prevent oil spill from spreading. It's called the boom and skimmers. And so the boom is like what contains the oil, and the skimmers, it collects them to avoid them from spreading. And yeah, next one. And here's like a video of like how dispersants work. Like, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's like sound. All right. Okay. So like some organizations about that's like funding on oil spills are the International Oil Pollution Compensation, the IOPC, the United Nations Environment Program is called the UNEP, and Patagonia, the brand, the clothing brand, and like the U.S. Coast Guard and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Next one. All right. Tim.
Yeah, so this is like, I'm going to talk about birds and oil spills now. Next slide. Looking broadly at oil spills, they destroy animals' ability to insulate themselves. Without the ability to insulate and repel cold water, birds and many different marine life with fur can die from hypothermia. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we were looking at birds specifically. That was our phylum. And then there's a lot of variation within the phylum, but all birds have wings, although not all of them can fly, and they need, they all have bills, and they all lay eggs, and then they all have skeletons, and then when their feathers become like slicked from the oil, they're unable to fly. So majority of the birds affected by this were the birds that live along the coastside or on the water. I focused in on the brown pelican, which has the unique hunting tactic of diving into the water, and they weren't able to see the oil on the water, and when they dived in, their wings became too saturated to fly, which often ended in them either dying of hypothermia because they couldn't repel the water, or they wouldn't be able to fly and they would drown. Next slide, please. We're gonna focus more on, I have a video about the Gulf of Mexico and the population of like brown bird pelicans and how it's recovered since the 1970s, which is when they became an endangered species and the government began protecting it and trying to introduce its population. Today, there's 290,000 brown pelicans in North America and 650,000 globally.
Great. Do you want us to watch the whole thing?
Yes, please.
Okay, pull it up. Oops.
As the oil slick in the Gulf of Mexico spreads along the coast, the next victims of this disaster could be the birds that depend on the region's fertile shorelines, bayous, and marshes.
It's a great habitat for birds in many ways for the same reason that it's a great habitat for fishing. There's a very rich sea life, shrimp, oysters, fish, and a lot of the seabirds feed on those areas.
Hundreds of species of birds breed, nest, and migrate throughout designated important bird areas along the Gulf Coast, and they're doing a lot of that right now.
It is probably the worst time of the year for this to happen.
Extremely vulnerable is the brown pelican, Louisiana's state bird fresh off the endangered species list, as well as migratory shorebirds that use the Gulf Coast like a highway pit stop, refueling for the rest of their trip to their northern breeding grounds. But for birds that live and roost in these areas, like oyster catchers and black skimmers, the prospects could be dimmer.
The wetland birds that are nesting in the Louisiana marshes, they're there. Their nests are there. They've got eggs there. If they have to abandon the breeding season, then you have not only the loss of birds from oiling, but then you have the complete reproductive failure of this year.
Even songbirds like orioles, warblers, and hummingbirds, not the usual victims of oil spills, could encounter problems as they migrate north for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
A lot of birds are coming from Central America, Cuba, and flying across the Gulf of Mexico at night. And if they are successful in burning this oil off, these birds may be impacted by flying into the smoke clouds. But I think in general, the real danger is to the wetland birds that are breeding in that area and the seabirds that are feeding there.
For Fry, none of this, unfortunately, is new to him. He was a technical expert for the U.S. government during the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989.
It was, on the order of 250, 300,000 birds affected there. There are probably not that many birds directly at risk now, but it depends on how long this oil spill continues and what the circulation in the Gulf of Mexico looks like. If, in fact, it lasts 2 to 3 months, the Exxon Valdez oiled 1,300 miles of shoreline, and the potential is there for this, all the way from Texas to Florida.
For Discovery News, I'm Jorge Rivas.
All right.
Next slide, please. Okay. In 1902, Theodore Roosevelt set aside Pelican. Can you go back a slide, please?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. He set aside Pelican Island, now known as Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge. And since then, they've worked to restore specifically the brown pelican. In 1970, which was when it was introduced, it became an endangered species. They've been working since then to restore it, and in 2009, it was officially taken off the endangered species list. It was a major success. And next slide, please. Many animals are dying from the oil spills, and when those animals die, it could affect the whole food chain and ecosystem that's taken millenniums to create. It also harms humans, which is not what we want, because it can be really painful and unhealthy. Frankly, seeing my bad, sorry, there's just like a lot of background noise. Since the brown pelican was removed in 2009, it was a restoration project that took several decades, and it really showed the competence of the Endangered Species Act. I think that this project needs to be funded, because without it, more and more species are going to be continued to be wiped out, and a lot of marine life is going to suffer, and we might not even have the chance to discover some of these. That's it. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Questions for Tammy and Keone?
What?
Sorry, my bad. Tammy and Ethan.
Oh, holy fuck, it's fucking loud.
Ethan, if that was you need to watch your language and make sure that you're muted.
I was wondering, Tammy, so is your solution like funding for like the brown pelicans in specifically, or like the different oil like catching and like if spills happen technologies?
Was that in reference to like these organizations?
Yeah.
Ethan or Tammy, any ideas? As far as I know, a lot of these organizations are just sort of generally protecting the environment. I don't know if anything is Pelican specific other than what Tammy mentioned with Pelican Island and sort of like conservation efforts. I mean, it looks like they put a lot of effort into this, into the brown pelican for Louisiana being the state bird. But I'm sure for these organizations, they're probably just in general. Is everybody hearing me? Like, did I lose people?
Yeah. I have another question as well.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, what has Congress done about oil spills? And like, have they passed like anything to like prevent oil spills, or to like, you know, punish the corporations?
I didn't do my research on that.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, that's a lot of politicians' money is the driving force, and there's a lot of money in oil. And so, unfortunately, the environment, I think, suffers because of that. So, off the top of my head, too, I don't know of any congressional stuff that's been done other than funding the Environmental Protection Agency. But I think they're all sadly still interested in turning a profit. And so it's more just trying to get oil drilled and transported as cheaply as possible. That's kind of part of the issue too, is that they're using these old ships and things like that. They're not interested in paying to renew things when they should be. But I think that these disasters, especially the Deepwater Horizon, really, because that was a failure of safety mechanisms that just weren't kept up properly. And so that really raised some awareness. And I don't know, hopefully that trickled down to improving oil rigs all around the United States, but I don't know, it's sort of unlikely. It's a good question, Landon.
Also, I was wondering, is there any like specific country that have done more to prevent oil spills than others? Like the United States, they've passed a couple things in Congress, right?
Yeah, probably.
But is there any country that has done a better job at preventing oil spills than others, and what their policies are?
I don't really know.
All right.
Yeah, again, looking at the map, I mean, it stands out to me that like Southern America and especially Australia, there's no markings of spills, but that's probably because there honestly isn't all that much oil drilling or transport going on in those areas. But I wonder if Australia has sort of like blocked its waters from, I'm sure there's some countries that probably don't even allow like oil tankers to move through their waters in an effort maybe to protect those regions. So like I wonder if that's what's going on in Indonesia, because you don't see any spills being noted there on this map. This is a pretty cool set of information. So for the Deepwater Horizon, did anyone see that Michael Bay movie that was made all about the Deepwater Horizon? It's kind of funny that that one again got a lot of attention. So the other thing that always strikes me is if any of you are at a gas station, again, you should take a look. There's always a sign in gas stations on the wall about how the chemicals in this place are known to be carcinogenic, and that's the refined oils there. So imagine trying to clean up crude oil or spilling crude oil on an environment. You can imagine the negative effects it's having. So okay, again, I know time is short, but I do want to get this last presentation in. So the last group we need to hear from is Angela and Landon. You guys feeling ready?
Yeah, but I'm not sure there's enough time.
Well, we'll just go over if that's okay with people. I mean, we've got the sort of break period, I think. So I don't know. I mean, that or no, I'd like to wrap this up. So yeah, let's just
Could we record a video and send it to you?
You could. I mean, other people would then have to watch that. But are you two okay with doing that then? I mean, if you record videos, then I'll just share those with the class.
That's perfectly fine with me.
Angela? Watch on your own time?
I'm fine with either.
Okay. All right, let's go with that then. Then I won't hold you longer than needed. So let me stop the share. So, all right, we'll have Angela and Landon record their presentation, share it with us, and then you can watch that on your own time. For homework, what I'd like you to do is create a sort of 1-minute pitch for your project. This is to do before you vote. And this is all listed on the tasks as well down here on the bottom, and homework post should show up right at the end of class. But the gist of it is that I've created a little Flipgrid. I assume a lot of you have been using Flipgrid already, or if you've used Flipgrid in the past. And it's a 1 minute sort of pitch video. And what I'd like you to do in that 1 minute is just to summarize your main issue and what you presented on. Talk about what funding could be used for and why you deserve the funding. Try not to like talk really fast. You're not trying to like cram as much into 1 minute as you can. What you want to do is try to refine your point, right? What are the key things that you want to get across? And I encourage too, if you want to use the animations that are available through Flipgrid, or if you want to like get in costume somehow or use a prop, I'll post a little example video here when I can that I just made really quickly. But that stuff I think makes it a little more fun to watch. So I encourage you to do that. So we'll wait for Land and Angela to share videos. I'll post those. Make your 1 minute pitch video and watch everybody else's. There'll be a form you can vote on, and that will conclude our project when we meet next time. We're going to move on to our next unit, which is going to be physics. And so I would like you to read Hewitt chapter 5.1 through 5.4. It's all about gravitational forces and things like that. And be ready for a little short do now reading quiz, like usual, next time we meet. It'll just probably be 4 or 5 questions.
Mr. 8,
Mm-hmm.
do you want each like group to make a Flipgrid summarizing their presentation, or like each person?
Each person. And so that's one thing. Normally in my classes, I would split you into breakout rooms and you could strategize with each other about what to do. But again, we ran out of time here. But again, you can just communicate with your partner and just figure out, I mean, a little repetition is okay because you all did the same project. But if you should kind of coordinate with your partner just to figure out what exactly you want to emphasize or highlight. Good question. All right, kiddos. So yeah, sorry we went a little bit slow there, but that's it. Homework should be posted. As always, you can hang out in here if you got questions for me. But thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay.
Alrighty.